Hello, everybody, and welcome to Storytelling, Philosophy, and Reception. Today we have Dr. Lisa Briggs, a research associate at Oxford University and founder of Barca Archaeology. Today we are talking about the world of the Odyssey through the eyes of an underwater archaeologist. Yay! It's going to be so exciting. Hello, Briggs. How are you?
Oh, I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to talk to you today about my work in underwater archaeology and how that's helped me understand the world of the Odyssey, especially in light of the fact that there's this huge interest, again, this renewed interest in the Odyssey. But then as we'll see throughout the course of our chat today, the interest in the Odyssey has been ongoing since its original writing and recording of the oral literature from thousands of years ago. So the interest that we're seeing today is just part of a 3 or 4 thousand year tradition.
I mean, when I met you and he had reached out to me and said you're an underwater archaeologist, with along with Peter Campbell, I was like, oh my gosh, another. Oh, I mean, that is just such a thrilling thing. What can you tell us that we don't know about the Odyssey through underwater archaeology?
Well, I was just reading the Odyssey again recently, and if I'm honest, in anticipation of the release of the Chris Nolan film.
Sure.
I had read Emily Wilson's incredible translation of the Iliad and had really enjoyed that. But the only version of the Odyssey I had read was ages and ages ago when I was a teenager, basically in high school. And I remember enjoying the story of the Odyssey, but I did find the language kind of difficult to get through. And so then I was delighted to pick up Emily Wilson's recent translation from what is that 2017 that came out, and I have to say it just absolutely reignited my passion and my love for that. I've actually got my copy right here.
Yes. Fantastic. I met her a while back in Brooklyn, and so I got like the signed copy when it first came out, like, yeah, whatever that was, like 8 years ago. That was exciting.
Oh, that must have been amazing to actually get to meet her and chat with her about it because I have just adored it. I adored the Iliad translation. I found it so powerful and moving and really quite accessible for the first time. But then rereading the entire story of the Odyssey from the perspective of an underwater archaeologist, I came to realize that the Odyssey really is a story about shipwrecks and mariners and all of the dangers that people who ply the seas encounter on a daily basis. And as we all know, the Odyssey is a great work of fiction, arguably one of the first really beautiful, great works of fiction that still survives today, that people still read and really enjoy and reference all the time. And I know it's a work of fiction, but the dangers that they discuss in the world of maritime travel, those are real dangers that still exist today. And so a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about today is my experience out at sea in the Mediterranean. And I've actually been lucky enough to go scuba diving and investigate underwater cultural heritage on a lot of the exact places that Homer describes in the Odyssey.
No giants, no cyclops. What did you discover? Like, give us one location.
Sure. Well, one location that I could start with is there have been 3 ships that date from around the time that Homer would have written the Iliad and the Odyssey, or composed it rather, from the Bronze Age, specifically from the late Bronze Age. There are 3 shipwrecks in Turkey that I've had the honor of being involved with their study. They were all discovered off the coast of Antalya. And one of the things I love about the description of both Homer's journey and then his son Telemachus is that often when they go and meet a ruler of a different island or a different city state, they get loaded up with these gifts, that this gift-giving culture was really important in the Bronze Age. And some of the ancient Bronze Age shipwrecks that I've had the honor to be a part of the research team that investigated them were actually loaded up with these incredible treasures that we found on the seafloor. So recently, there was a Bronze Age shipwreck discovered off of Antalya, Turkey, and it's called the Kumlucha shipwreck. And that was carrying a cargo of these beautiful copper ingots, these huge hunks of copper, which was arguably the most important metal in the Bronze Age because you used it to make bronze when you mixed it with tin. And scuba diving down to about 45 to 48 meters to actually excavate this shipwreck from the time of Homer was just incredibly powerful experience. Not only did we get to really touch this part of history that was so kind of profound and has made this huge impression on the world ever since then, but now the entire site is invaded by lionfish that have these huge spiky spines. So even as we were going down and scuba diving, it was like a lionfish convention. I don't know what they were all doing there, meeting up for some kind of party, but we had to be really careful as we were digging and excavating to not get stung by these terrifying lionfish. And so, yeah, as a classicist, you'll probably know better than I. We think that Homer was probably talking about events that occurred in the late Bronze Age, but
Hmm.
that he probably lived in the Iron Age. Is that correct?
Right, right. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, okay, like, 700, we're already dealing 700 BC, we're talking about Iron Age, and then in my mind, like geometric age is like 1100 to like what 900 maybe BC. So you're dealing with 1100 BC.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, these shipwrecks actually are from more like 1300
Oh
BC.
my
So
gosh.
probably even before the time of the events that Homer was talking about, specifically in the Iliad. If those events ever actually occurred, they probably would have occurred at the end of the Bronze Age in what we call the late Bronze Age.
That's
And then, yes, he would
amazing.
have composed it much later. But these treasure ships are so exciting. I didn't actually have the honor of working on one of the best preserved Bronze Age treasure ships that's called the Ulu Barun because it was excavated basically before we were born, a really long time ago. But I did have the honor of working on the material itself and doing scientific analysis of the artifacts that were found on the Ulu Barun when we were basically just little babies. So this shipwreck was excavated beautifully, and on it they found not only these copper ingots, just like the ones that I discovered on the Kumlucha shipwreck in Turkey, but on it they found things like a golden chalice that is just exactly like the ones described in the Iliad or the Odyssey. They found jewelry that was made in Egypt. They found amber from the Baltic. And when I was rereading Emily Wilson's version of the Odyssey, I think they genuinely talk about giving gifts of amber necklaces to some of the queens, and I think that even Helen of Troy was adorned at one point with an amber necklace. So when you look at the cargo that this one shipwreck, the Ulu Barun, was carrying, it's almost a shopping list of the kinds of gifts that Homer describes both Odysseus receiving and then his son Telemachus when Telemachus went around trying to figure out what had happened to his father.
So, Amber, uh,
Oh
like
my God, Amber!
I
Yes.
almost wore this today, and I should have, like, but just in honor of what you were saying. So gold and amber, I can easily imagine. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting! And you had to, or you had the opportunity to like actually handle these objects.
I do the scientific analysis on these beautiful chunks of resin that were found inside these jars, which are basically like amphora. But for some reason in the Bronze Age, we don't call them amphora, we call them jars. But a lot of the jars on the Ulu Barun shipwreck were full of this beautiful resin, Pistacia terebinthus resin. And we think that that resin was used to make incense and then also for cosmetics, maybe. And then some people have theorized that it was also used for waxing when the ancient people wanted to remove their body hair. They might have also used this resin for that purpose. But also, descriptions in the Odyssey describe perfumed, beautiful incense inside the palace and incense burning in the braziers of these palaces. And I can't help but think about that when I actually get to physically touch and handle this resin from a Bronze Age shipwreck.
And you have the best excuse to be handling these objects, so I was always just in the museum end of things, as a museum intern, where I'm on that side receiving it and looking at it, but you actually get to hold it like when you're first discovering it. I mean, that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, the experience of being the first person to touch an ancient object from the seafloor for the first time in thousands of years, yeah, I'll be honest, it's a really cool feeling, and there's kind of nothing like it.
Did you
But the cool
always, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, the coolest thing about this resin from the Bronze Age, just like the resin described in the Odyssey, is that even today, thousands of years later, the resin still has a really strong smell. It smells beautiful, kind of a bit like frankincense, and it smells like that incense that you would find in a really ancient, beautiful Byzantine church or a really old Catholic church, that very, very traditional old school style of incense. And whenever I'm like taking the samples and doing DNA analysis of it or looking at it through a microscope, just this beautiful smell envelops the laboratory. And that's also really special.
That's amazing. Not translating, but reading the translations of the Orphic hymns, um, the Orphic hymns also describes when you open the Orphic hymns, it actually says first of all the incense that's burning while doing the hymns. Isn't that amazing?
No, that's amazing. I had no idea.
Yeah, well, most people don't read the Orphic hymns. They go straight for the Homeric hymns. It's actually amazing. So when you're saying that, I'm thinking, absolutely, absolutely. So they used it while singing songs in praise to the gods. Um, I think it's so interesting that it still has a smell. So like, I don't know what these are made of, molecularly, so that they somehow don't get washed. The scents don't get washed off by seawater.
Yeah, and so this resin, it's from a tree, the Pistacia terebinthus tree, and you basically get it in the same way that you would get something like pine resin out. So they make a little nick in the tree, and then it kind of flows out and gets this hard crust, and it sort of looks a lot like you would expect like pine resin on the outside of a pine tree. And in a similar way, it's very hydrophobic and really dense. And so for that reason, we think that seawater gets inside of it, but then the seawater might leach out of it over the course of thousands of years. But the actual molecular structure itself as a triterpenoid basically means that it's this really kind of closed off circular structure. So it's very, very hydrophobic and does not degrade underwater at all, which is really incredible and great for archaeologists. But your description of these Orphic hymns having both the kind of the song and the music and the incense, it's really incredible to think about what a sort of sensory experience these palaces had to be in the ancient world. So from my research, I can tell you all about the smells, and from your research, you could tell us all about what the soundscape would have been like. So together, we could be able to recreate a Homeric palace.
So here's the Orphic hymns, and so I have this is just the translations one, not the Greek. But here it says to the Muses, which is Orphic hymn 76, to the Muses, incense, frankincense, up on top before it says the actual prayer. Isn't that incredible? Like so it tells you what's burning as the prayers um, are being sung. So yes,
I love that.
absolutely.
It's like set the stage. Okay, first things
Yeah.
first, we need some incense, and then now we can get to the hymns.
Yeah, which is awesome, because I don't get that in Homeric hymns. And the first time I open the Orphic hymns, I'm like, oh, what, what? So it's amazing. And now I wanted to ask about the gold. So in my experience with swimming with my gold jewelry in the ocean, I know I'm awful, but it happens a lot. When I'm in Hawaii or in Greece, I'm wearing my jewelry and I go in the water because I totally forget that I'm wearing it. And only high quality gold won't get ruined in the ocean over time. Uh, a, a gold chain I'd been wearing for, oh my gosh, since I was a kid. So like it's like 25 years old, and it's not worn out. And but until my last trip to Greece, where just the sun and the sand, it was really harsh in Crete. And I just kept not taking it off because we were in and out of the water so much to go walk around the village and then come back. And it finally started a little bit, I could tell is wearing out. But another gold necklace I've had, which is that one is it was an 18 karat that wasn't wearing out. So I can imagine that for this gold chalice to not wear out for so long must be at least 18 karat, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of gold that they were smelting and making treasures like chalices and jewelry out of in the Bronze Age and then even on into the Iron Age and the Classical period was incredibly pure. And, some people today question, why is gold valuable at all? But it's valuable and it's always been valuable to ancient people for the exact reason that you just described, is that it's an incorruptible metal. So it's one of the only metals that you could put in seawater and this beautiful golden chalice looked incredible 3,300 years after the ship sank. So, for that reason, I think that's the main reason why gold was so valued in the ancient world.
How do you clean up gold of that of such a high caliber from the ocean? Like what do you use to clean it with?
Well, thankfully, because it's an incorruptible metal, it takes less conservation than other things like ferrous metals, things made out of iron, which you would find in later periods. Obviously, we didn't have iron in the Bronze Age, but those, when they come out of the sea, they're just covered in concretion because iron interacts so much with the seawater. So that takes a lot of conservation. But the first things that we do is we always put them in a freshwater bath and we slowly bring out the freshwater that's been basically leaching any salt that might have been absorbed. Gold's not going to absorb a lot of salt, unlike things like iron. But we still put it in a freshwater bath to conserve it to start with. And then beyond that, I'll do full disclosure that I'm not a conservation specialist. And often the things that I find, I hand them off to my incredible colleagues who specialize in things like that, like Professor Barbara Davide in Rome, who's one of the leading underwater archaeological finds conservationists. And she can conserve anything we find from any time period and any material. So if I have questions, I always go to Barbara.
I have seen Peter had sent me like a while back. In fact, I made music to one of the videos where he was showing the underwater dives that his team had done, where they they're going in and there's jars and jars, and you were talking about amphorae and jars, and there's creatures going around these jars, and it's just so fascinating. So when you go in there, and you're first shooing away the sea life, right, to get to the objects. What is that like? And having to pick them up, you knowing that they're heavy, like I mean, can you walk me through the process of like actually diving and getting these objects?
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, I can use as an example another one of the sites that was mentioned in the Odyssey from the perspective of an underwater archaeologist. So, we think that the island of Calypso maybe was actually the island of Gozo off of Malta. So, it's the second largest island in the little Maltese archipelago. And the name of that as Homer describes it, is Oyiya. Calypso's island might have been the island of Gozo. And on the island of Gozo, I have had the incredible privilege of working on a Phoenician shipwreck. Now, this one we think was from around 600 or 650 BC. So this might actually have sank right around the time that Homer had finished composing the Iliad and the Odyssey. If we think he composed it around 700 BC, then these stories weren't that old, or these compositions weren't that old when this shipwreck that we call the Jlendi shipwreck actually sank. So when you first come down and you see a Phoenician ship, the first thing you notice are all of these jars, all of these amphora on the seafloor. And the ones we found on the Jlendi ship, a lot of them are Maltese jars, locally produced in Malta. But then a lot of them are from North Africa, from the Phoenician colonies in Carthage. And when I did scientific analysis on those, I discovered that some of them contained wine, which might be honeyed wine, and some of them contained plant oil, which we think was probably olive oil. But when we see the marine life on it, that definitely is the most exciting part. So my favorite, my absolute favorite, is when octopuses, they love to make their home inside of these jars, these amphora. Because I guess the narrow neck of the jar creates this perfect little space where they can live inside of there, they can lay their eggs, they can protect their babies. And ancient shipwrecks basically become these underwater nurseries for juvenile fish, and where if a bit like a scene in Finding Nemo, where all of these baby fish can hide in little nooks and crannies. And then for that reason, life creates life. So the more juvenile fish there are, the more other kinds of fish come around. And on these beautiful ancient jars and ancient stone grinding stones, we find sponges and coral and all this marine algae. So it really looks like this underwater reef that was created by the ancient shipwreck itself.
And that must sort of hurt your feelings a little bit that you have to kind of scrape off the animals and go, I'm sorry, we have to wreck your home and take these. And so, what do you guys do with the creatures to, to sort of to find them a new home?
Well, for the bigger creatures like octopuses or eels, we definitely kind of try to like wiggle the jar to make sure that they have the opportunity to escape. And then I'll be honest, there's not a lot we can do for the sponges. I always try to remove things like the sponges and then at least put them back in the sea so that they can maybe colonize something else. But then whenever we see a really impressive piece of coral growing off a jar, we definitely consider whether or not that's the jar we need to raise and recover to the surface. Because if we have options where we can leave and preserve as much of the marine biology as possible, then we definitely try to make a concerted effort to preserve a lot of the marine biology there.
I would never have considered the sea creatures until I saw the videos. And I think that's so important, the relationship between archaeologists and underwater archaeologists, and that interaction with the marine life today. It's like the ancient world with the current world, and all their families that have been living in that area. It's like, wow. Um, I yeah. I mean, the world you're describing underneath is just actually absolutely amazing to me. So you've described Calypso's Island and
Oh, so yeah, the Kumlucha and Uluburun wrecks, which were probably treasure ships similar to the treasure ships that are described when Odysseus and Telemachus are given a bunch of gifts. But there's a third site, probably my favorite, that I'd love to tell you about.
yes, please, yes. What is it?
So it seems, and full disclosure, I haven't seen Chris Nolan's version of the Odyssey. I'm actually about to go see it tonight, only as soon as we're done chatting about it. So I'll have to report back. But it seems that a lot of people are really taken with the depiction of Circe and Circe's Island. And I had the great pleasure of directing several underwater archaeological projects on an island in the Mediterranean that a lot of people think was Circe's Island. But people think it might be this beautiful island off the north coast of Sicily called Ustica. And around Ustica are just dozens of ancient shipwrecks. And I'll tell you why. It's because Ustica is very close to the Aeolian Islands, where the god of wind, Aeolus, blows constantly, causing all of these ships to wreck. So the underwater landscape off of Ustica is absolutely stunning, and as is Gozo in Malta. But honestly, I started thinking to myself, I thought, why are there so many shipwrecks around these islands that are described in the Odyssey? And then I realized that the descriptions that he's giving are always that people had a shipwreck there. So I think that throughout time, these areas have just always been really dangerous places to go sailing, that they had jagged rocks or they had unpredictable winds like sent by the god Aeolus from the Aeolian Islands. So the island of Ustica, potentially Circe's island, is just an absolutely incredible place full of underwater archaeology.
Okay, let me just unpack that. This is just so exciting talking to you about this. Oh my gosh. All right. So so Ustica, which is the equivalent of in ancient Greek Aiaia or modern Greek Aeaea in Homer's Odyssey is a gorgeous island, right? In Nolan's Odyssey, it's not as pretty as all that, and you'll be when you see it, you'll be sad when you see Calypso's island because it's described as such a beautiful island in Homer's Odyssey, and in Nolan's Odyssey, Calypso's island is just a beach, you know. So it's I know the colors that we are used to having gone to all these islands, they're not there. They're not there in Nolan's Odyssey. So
Oh, that's a shame because in Homer's description of Aeaea, Circe's island, one of the reasons why people think it might have been Ustica is because geographically it's so similar to the description that there's big cliffs on one side, which you find on Ustica, that the middle of the island where Circe had her little hut and where she turned Odysseus's men into pigs, on the island of Ustica, there's these beautiful kind of volcanic little mountains because it's a small island, but they're all forested and they're covered in beautiful wildflowers and wild herbs. And just like as is described in the Odyssey, when Circe, is this witch, loved to have her medicinal herbs and all of her plants there. And so I think these are some of the big reasons why people think potentially that Ustica is was the inspiration for Aiaia. But that's a shame because these places are so physically beautiful. I wish they had been represented in such a physically beautiful way in this film.
come to think of it though, in let me think. In the film for Circe's Island, there is a meadow, and she is gathering stuff. You do see her gathering stuff. So there is that. It's just to me, having been in Greek meadows, like I feel like he should have sort of zoomed in at the flowers and the foliage a lot more so you could see how pretty, it is rather than just sort of like a faraway view where you see it, but it looks like any other sort of nondescript meadow rather than like, wow, gorgeous, gorgeous flowers and all that blooming stuff that you could almost smell. Like, that's what I'd want to see. Like something, the colors where you could almost smell it and take it uh, and use as tea. I think of mountain tea, a Greek mountain tea and such. Um,
Yeah,
and
again,
so,
that kind of sensory experience where the sounds and the smells of the ancient world. And yeah, that was a bit of a missed opportunity.
were you able to roam around on the island of Ustica yourself and walk around the meadows and such?
Yes, my archaeological projects there took ages and ages. So I lived on Ustica for basically 3 months and would go on little hikes up into the hills where you see all these wildflowers and big, beautiful deciduous trees and also pine trees. And I was always looking out for what I thought would be Circe's hut or where I would have put Circe's hut in my mind. Yeah, it's an incredibly rich island, and the scuba diving and the underwater cultural heritage there is some of the absolute best in the Mediterranean, if not the world.
I have to say that in the Odyssey, I can't remember how her house was described exactly. In Madeline, my friend Madeline Miller's Circe book, it's a bigger house so that there are. I mean, it's not a big house. I don't think in her description either, but big enough so that there are uh, servants coming in and out. Right? It's not small. Whereas in Nolan's Odyssey, it's truly like a hut, like a well, like we would think of a studio apartment, like really, really small. And and in the ancient world, I always talk to my students about this. What they consider to be a small house is that what we consider to be a small house, because they're like small house description usually has a big backyard, and where they have trees and such, and you're like, Okay, when they say small house, do they mean the house is small or the whole property is small? And then, Circe in the Odyssey had servants, just like Calypso had servants around. So it's like, okay, it has to be big enough so that they have a place to go sleep in, and such, right? So, yeah, small to us is not small to them, back
Well,
then.
I
So,
certainly depict, I hope that any depiction of Circe's house has at least a little loft or second floor, because I love the which one of Odysseus's men he ends up dying because he's trying to get off of the loft in Circe's house, and he falls down the ladder and I think breaks his neck. And then I remember because Odysseus meets him in Hades and he's like, "Why are you here? I left you at Circe's house alive." And he's like, "I fell off the ladder and died." So we know that her house or hut at least had something like a second floor, if not a loft.
okay, Nolan's Odyssey is a small, little, like really small, small, like one room small. Yeah, I went in going, this. I'm just gonna pretend this is not Homer's Odyssey. I'm just gonna enjoy it as it is, which is a great thing. Like I'm glad I did that in my brain because otherwise I would have hated it. Absolutely hated it. The reason why Emily Wilson, I think, uh, didn't like the movie is because she was going in there hoping to see Homer's Odyssey or parts of it in there, and I went in there going, I'm kind of curious to know, what elements might be in there. Um, so I was going, and if you go in there that way, I think it's going to be okay. It won't be disappointing. Um, Being an underwater archaeologist, I think you would be much more um, hoping for colors because you're so used to colors, as a sensory experience, and it's not colorful. It's There's a lot of gray wash and beige wash of stuff. Sorry to
Oh,
say.
it's a bit of a missed opportunity, but yeah, I'm at least grateful to that more people. I'm just really hoping that this spurs a greater interest in the world of the Odyssey and these kinds of places where you can actually maybe go and experience what might have been the inspiration for them, like Gozo, Malta, and then of course Ustica, Sicily for Circe's Island. But yeah, we haven't yet gotten to talk about one of my favorite parts of the Odyssey, which I hope is in the film, but no spoilers. Don't let me know because I'm gonna go see it tonight. But one of my favorite parts reading it again was the part with the sirens, because I get so excited thinking about how ancient mariners and ancient people traveling at sea, which is really the heart of what I study as an underwater archaeologist. Sadly, the ones who weren't successful and their ship sank. But when Homer is describing the siren's call luring in Odysseus and him having to plug his compatriot, his fellow sailors' ears with wax, was one of the most kind of evocative parts of it. And that made me think about how on your new incredible album, which I really want to hear about, your song, The Siren's Call, is absolutely stunning and is just this haunting, beautiful piece that I think it would drive me to go to the rocks to hear it more. So yeah, can you tell me how you kind of researched that and how you got the inspiration to write that? And then of course all of the rest of the songs on your incredible album.
I am an absolute water girl. Like I was, I go to Hawaii and I've gone to Hawaii every year, twice a year, three times a year since I was a kid. And, have swum, have surfed, have, just gone around those areas for so long. And the siren's call to me is the sounds of the waves and the wind. So that was really my inspiration for Siren's Call. And when you hear the wind, it sounds like a melody sometimes. So I wanted to get that sort of feeling, that vibe in there. And I did try at first to make it dactylic hexameter, and I just couldn't because the rhythm of the waves and the winds was not going to go with dactylic hexameter for this song. There are only three songs in my entire album that are not dactylic hexameter, and it's the Song of Circe, the Siren's Call, And there's one more that I can't remember right now off the top. Oh, and Penelope, and the rest is in dactylic hexameter. So knowing that, what did drive it is the pounding of the waves. So I wanted that rhythm in there, and I wanted the song to emulate the sounds of the winds, and then on top of that, I wanted to put in just a little bit of string sound in there. Um, and then the sirens speaking, but singing to the sailors. And that is something that most people don't realize is that they actually do sing stuff. And what they're singing to them is, we will tell you, come, sailors, and we will tell you the things that are and the things that come to pass on the earth. So they're prophets. Something that most people don't realize, they are powerful in that they will tell you these things that are and will be. And that's what draws the sailors. It's that promise of knowledge, along with probably the music of it and like how beautiful it must be, this island where they're crashing into. And the sailors don't die because they crash in. Circe says, beware the sirens call. It's they sing to you in such a beautiful way. They will entice you with their, I think, now I have to reread it. I think, I can't remember if she says the words, with their words or with their music or with their song. Maybe she just says their song, which implies music with words. And she says, because you will go up and climb and they're in a meadow. They're in a meadow, and all around them are the bones of men. And the men are there. They died because they forgot to eat and drink and completely forgot about their families at home listening to their songs. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, so I have to come up with a melody, um, with the words on top of the melody that will somehow haunt you in such a way that you're gonna want to stay. I'm like, that's a tall order. I'll do the best I can. So that's so I made it as basic as I could with rhythm and with strings and then the sounds of the voice. And that was really my process behind it. I was really inspired by my relationship with the waves and the wind and the sea and swimming in it.
Wow, and that's so interesting that what the draw of the sirens was the desire to know the future, and that the people who were unlucky enough to kind of fall into that might have ended up giving up their future because they wanted to know what it was. They wanted to know what the future was so bad that they ended up not having a future and just dying of starvation in a meadow. Goodness, that is so fascinating. But then on the subject of the inspiration, I would love to hear more about your inspiration for the song related to Penelope as well. That, she's such an interesting character, and I'm so excited to see how she's portrayed in the new Chris Nolan film. But just reading the Odyssey, that, she can be seen as really a paragon of womanhood and virtue, but also like her husband Odysseus, that she is kind of crafty. When we think about making the funeral shroud for her father-in-law Laertes, but then unpicking it every night so that she doesn't have to keep her promise to the suitors. But yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about how you saw her as a character and then how your song about her was inspired?
Sure. Okay. So, this is just a volume one. So let me start with that. That I wanted so badly to put in different facets of each personality, of each character's personality in there, but I could only pick one for each song. And so for this first volume, I picked the sad Penelope. So it's where she is saying that she would like to just fall in and just sort of die, so in her grief. And I wanted to get get the grief in there in contrast to the sirens trying to pull in, and in with Calypso trying to make him stay, and with Circe trying to tempt him to drink with the wine, and so just in context of all that, and with Helen's prophesying, um, I chose the passage where Penelope was enveloped in her grief, waiting for Odysseus to come home. In volume two, I'm actually going to be singing the parts where she's trying, she's speaking up more. Okay, so the strength of the character here is more of like a quiet strength to me, where this is her alone in her grief, and she, with the idea that she is blocking off everybody else, and this is her in her private world. So we see her in her private grief here, and she has to be strong enough um, to the world one way, and then this is actually her blocking off the world, and this is her alone, and that's how I saw it. So when, as women who we lead such multiple lives, and we have to be strong to the public. And this is a queen. She has to be strong for everyone, for her son. And I have a 19-year-old son, so I know how this goes. Um, and I think maybe that's how I thought of it. I'm like, there's the outside world, and I have to face them all the time. And I have to be strong and look strong and appear strong for the outside world, and especially for my son. And no matter what happens, I have to be strong for them. But then this is me alone. This is me in the most inner part of my chambers, in my soul. And this is me in my grief. And I have to be quiet about it. So it's a quiet grief that I'm singing. So it seems like, oh, well, that's how you see Penelope, just a sad woman. No, no, what I'm saying is this is the only time that she has to have that moment. That is the only moment. And then, because right after that moment in the Odyssey, then the women come in to the chamber. So that's it. She has 2 minutes, to fall into her sadness. And then she has to collect herself, for them coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the depictions of her grief are so kind of visceral in Homer's. It just becomes really readily apparent that in this very kind of, patriarchal society, that a woman's place in the home without the protection of her husband or her father was really precarious. And I was really interested and reminded again of the relationship between her son and between Telemachus and Penelope, because it's just very apparent constantly that when he comes of age, that all of this house and this palace and this land will be his and not hers, and that the expectation would be that she kind of takes a back step to whoever her son will end up marrying, and then the life kind of moves on in that way. And so these descriptions of her grief, this very private grief, were really intense. And I feel like you've done an incredible job capturing that in sound, this really kind of intimate moments where, she is just incredibly devastated for missing her husband and her partner in all things.
This was my notes. I found my notes on the first time I was going through Penelope, and I put here, I think of Penelope weaving, and I see her hands move deftly, rhythmically, and that's really how the song began. And I could not find an instance when she played the lyre in her moments of sorrow, like Achilles did in the Iliad. So I gave her that moment in this song, using her words. I thought of her words in a simple rhythm, and imagined her weeping her fury, her passion in one sweeping moment. Okay, now let's talk about Circe. All right.
Well,
So,
I mean, actually, can we? Yes, yeah. Let's talk about Circe, and then I want to ask you something else about Penelope's
oh,
house. I
oh,
don't know if you want to
please,
talk about that now.
please, yeah, go ahead. You can ask about Penelope before we go into Circe.
Well, so it's interesting that you just mentioned that there isn't a direct reference to Penelope herself playing a lyre or expressing her grief through music or song or rhythm. But I was just in my rereading of the Odyssey and Emily Wilson's translation was reminded of the musician character who is kind of a funny, a bit of a bard who's being forced by the suitors to entertain them. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he's kind of threatened at the end by Odysseus, that Odysseus might make him pay for everyone else's actions while he was gone. But yeah, can you tell me a bit as a lyre player yourself and arguably a modern bard and a maker of music? Yeah, what did you think about the characters who actually play music and are depicted entertaining the people in the story?
Demodocus in Odyssey was treated so well in that he right away they ask him to come in and they put down like a silver platter or something for him, you know. So like he's welcomed and treated well, and then asked to play. That's one of the bards in there, and I was just thinking, gosh, that feels about right. You know, when I'm asked to I'm invited to perform, um, it's always wonderful to feel welcome. Bringing around a lyre is always an interesting experience because I have to be prepared for anything, really. Sometimes there's no seat. Sometimes I have to be standing, playing, and like they didn't think about that. Like I always request a seat and a music stand so I could put my music up, and maybe a microphone, depending on how big the hall is. And in the Odyssey, the hall is big enough that there are jugglers, basically, or they're not juggling, but like they are dancing with balls, right? So like people are dancing and people are, I think, tapping, and there's rhythm going on, and clapping or something like that. And I'm thinking that's so great. So there's like rhythm. The audience itself is having rhythm, clapping, stomping their feet or something, and there's dancers. So this is a fun party once the musician comes in, and that's not happened yet to me. The jugglers, the ball playing, but I have performed in Delphi with dancers. And that's an amazing experience being in an outside theater with dancers. I haven't been in an indoor situation where we have dancers. That would be great. But there's a feeling that people always say, like in Shakespeare, that Shakespeare was not supposed to be serious. It's supposed to be fun. And as you were describing, like it's kind of funny, like when people are wrangling him about stuff, right, and or get angry at him and things. That might not be as fun as an experience if people are getting mad at me for something I'm singing. But what would be fun is that interaction where it's like it's okay, you can interact with me. You don't have to be super quiet. You could clap and go whatever, and if people get up and dance, that would be like really really fun. I would love that. So that's my feeling is that interaction with the audience on the one hand can be good, on the one hand can be bad. Um, yeah.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems like that music from all time periods previous, it seemed to be a bit more casual and more interactive. From what I have read or from what I have heard, that maybe apart from a very serious religious ceremony, when somebody had a bard in their home, I think the expectation was that people were drinking, maybe some people were dancing, that there was conversation going on. And I always think it's really interesting when I speak to some classical musician friends who are playing music from, say, the 1700s, 1800s, that a lot of this as chamber music, it was designed to be for a party, often in someone's palace or someone's, palatial home, where there would be people talking. And they say that sometimes it makes them feel a bit awkward if they're playing with an orchestra, that really people should be kind of moving with the music or, chatting, catching up, having some drinks, and that this very serious stage, sitting down, staring at you and doing nothing else isn't necessarily an accurate depiction of what the music was kind of composed to do and to be. Do you feel that way?
Yes. So when I take out like my ukulele and start strumming or yeah, it and we're around friends, like that's more the feeling that I think the lyre should be giving, where it's a party where people just go, so can you like sing us a tune? And I'm like, oh yeah, all right, we're at a campfire, or we're just like in a house party, and it's like, here we go, strumming this. I feel like that's the same thing, like with a lyre, right? It could just be like that. I mean, what's being described in the Odyssey is like a larger crowd. So like, sing us a song, bard. But it is a party at the same time. So you have to think people are coming and going to the bathroom. They're not paying attention to the entire song whatsoever. And there are moments of the song, the entire tale, where it's like fun and happier, peppier music. And then moments when it's like, if I'm singing Penelope thing, people should be quiet at that moment, listening to her sadness. But people are still coming in and out. Some people are like, I don't want to be sad. I don't need to listen to this tale. Oh wait, that's a catchy tune. Now she's singing about that adventure. All right, and so let's listen to that part. And there are some songs that are like livelier, and I'm strumming like this, and so yeah, there are moments where people should be quiet, and moments when they should be like clapping along. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we kind of put these things just because they're from a different time period, kind of put it into a box of this is only can be enjoyed in a serious sit down way when really it could be much more interactive. But the one other thing I really did want to ask you about is the song for Circe.
Oh, sure,
I
sure.
think that Circe is such an interesting character. And this isn't just because I've done tons of archaeological work on Ustica, which might be Circe's island. I just think she's a fascinating character generally and is one of the more kind of fun parts of the Odyssey. So yeah, can you tell me about how your inspiration was for the song for Circe's song on your album?
Absolutely. I'll start by pointing out that Penelope, Circe, Calypso, and Helen in Iliad and Odyssey were all supposed to be weaving. So, with that in mind, the the rhythm, I feel like, okay, so they're weaving, they're making things, right? And weaving goes like this for them. But there's a lot of finger motion. So I'm always thinking, gosh, I just really wish that somewhere it said that they, afterwards, with all that, then they put that down and they strummed on their lyre or something a little bit, where they're playing a musical instrument. Um, so Circe, again, there's a rhythm in my head when she's beckoning with her song, because the sailors, when they first hear Circe, she is singing while she's weaving. They hear her singing first. They hear a woman's voice, and then they come in because realizing that, oh, there's a woman in there. Okay, it's populated. Let's go in, and there's a song. So I start with some sort of enticing melody. Uh, that's how it begins, and then the words that I chose is when she's already talking to Odysseus, and she's saying, "Why aren't you? Why aren't you eating and drinking? Do you think I'm trying to trick you?" That's what she's asking. So that's how I sang it, where she's like first enticing them, and then she's still trying to be wily, and she's still enchanting. So I called it Circe Enchanting the Song, because she's trying to chant, to sing um, Odysseus into her world. And in the Odyssey, she has one specific thing in mind for Odysseus, right? Like, if you sleep with me, I will let them go. So she is a seductress. So the song had to be seductive in that way. Um, so yeah, it's a different sort of feeling from the Penelope song, where it's like she's trying to just sing her grief. This is a more seductive song, more like how the sirens are. But I had to make it even more so, but personal, to Odysseus, because it's a one-on-one. It's like, do you think I'm trying to trick you? There's no trick here. I'm being straightforward to you. There's there's wine, and then there's me, you know? So, yeah, that was that. That was how I was inspired. And also still keeping the lyre part pretty simple, pretty rhythmic, like the sound, like the weaving, still that rhythm. Hmm.
Now that's so interesting because the weaving, I mean, there's just countless description of women in the ancient world from Homeric times all the way up through the, classical period that, a woman weaving is one of the most common things to be described on a Roman tombstone, for example. And that's so cool that that could be the thread that ties together all of the women in these stories is their constant weaving. But that's so fascinating because the Circe's enchantress nature. I mean, she had very clear designs on Odysseus, and she made her intentions known very, very clearly. And I just cannot wait to see how she's depicted in Christopher Nolan's version because, yeah, no spoilers, but she's just always been one of my favorite characters, and I absolutely adore the song that you composed about her.
In the 1990s little miniseries, the Odyssey, they had Bernadette Peters be Circe. Gorgeous. And if you don't know who Bernadette Peters is, she was very well known as a singer in Broadway. Tremendous voice. And gorgeous with like these curls and just she's a gorgeous woman. And they had her playing Circe in the miniseries. And that's how actually I see Circe, like that. A gorgeous woman with a gorgeous voice and being a seductress. You'll see Nolan's Odyssey and tell me what you think later about that. Calypso is in her cave, right? And you didn't ask about Calypso, but since we're talking about women and weaving, you don't usually associate a woman in a cave with weaving, and yet Calypso was weaving in her cave in Ogygia. Not something you'd expect. But when you see the description of Calypso's island, and I'm sure you read it because you seem to have been reading closely, right? It's an island that has everything that you would want, anything you would want, with trees and fruits and streams, everything. So she can get the flax that she needs and what have you to be weaving. Um, with Calypso's song, what I wanted to focus on was when did she beg for him to stay? She never for him to stay at all. When Hermes said, you got to let him go, she gets mad at Hermes first, saying, you gods are just so jealous when goddesses finally find a mate, who's human. But what she tells Odysseus is, are you really so set on still going home? Because if you want to go, then farewell, farewell. Uh, but if you stay, you will be immortal. So there's that. She only has like a few lines that I sing from the lines that I chose, where one moment she goes, if you want to go, farewell. But if you stay, you can be immortal. There has to be enough weight when she says that. But if you stay with me in our home, you will be immortal. And so I had to make those words. How do I make those words happen since she only says it briefly? And that's the part, strangely enough, that most people remember is, didn't she promise him immortality? It's like she says so many things. She says lots, and she has like 2 pages worth of stuff she says, but that's the line people remember. So what I did is I just repeated those words over and over again in my song. Athanatos, and you will be immortal. So that's ringing, because I think those words are powerful enough to ring in your head. So if this is not the first time she said it to him, then he knows quite well that he has that option, and yet he chooses to go home anyway. And she's fine, she ends up she tells him the next line, which I don't sing, is when she's like, because I will be giving you provisions and and stuff, which she does. She helps him out. So she's not mad at him. She's just like, you can go. We've had a good time. We've had our run. 7 years with me. You can go. I wish you well. I wish you well. But hey, can you stay? And it's got to be like that. And it's got to be delivered like that. It can't be mad. It can't be a command. It's a simple, let's just talk for a moment and be frank with each other and be tender with each other, I think, for that moment before they go sleep together, before he goes. As much as he's saying, I want to go home to my wife, she's like, okay, honey. And then they sleep together and they go. I mean, it's an interesting, yeah, but it's an interesting relationship they have.
Yeah, and the offer of immortality is such a powerful offer, given the fact that for the whole other rest of the book and every other story, he's really just trying to avoid death. In most cases, death by shipwreck or death by Cyclops attack or death by getting snatched by Scylla. But the fact that trying to avoid death in all this time, and then he's offered immortality. When he turns that down in order to get home to Penelope and his father and his son, that is a really powerful moment. Absolutely.
I love your take on that. Oh my gosh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That this is the final offer and the biggest offer in that way. Oh wow. I love it. Now that even gives much more power to those words. And Helen in the Odyssey, remember, I don't know if it leaped out at you, but in Odyssey book 15, she prophesies to Telemachus, right? Like the entire time that Telemachus was asking, where's my dad? What happened to my dad? And she's the one that prophesies. Those are the words I chose for Helen, is when she prophesies about Odysseus returning. Because to me, that shows her power as a queen, as a half immortal. So I was trying to represent, each of the women somehow in the Odyssey.
Yeah, and the Helen, that interaction in particular between Odysseus's son and the woman who is basically the cause of all of his family's suffering, I thought was such a powerful part of the story that it's just fascinating how there seems to be kind of almost very little resentment, but then again, that's probably because in the original Homeric telling, I'm not sure if Helen actually had that much agency. It was genuinely kind of captured and taken against her will, and that kind of later stories are maybe the ones that are suggesting that she went willingly, but really in reality, it was probably much more of a kind of kidnapping situation. But that interaction between kind of potentially the source of all of their suffering and having to deal with the suitors that Telemachus, I'm sure, it must have been kind of, a little bit of a fraught interaction, but it's not really described that way in the book.
No, she didn't have to apologize or anything. She's just treated as a queen. There she is. She's there with her husband. Um, and she says in the Odyssey, like, oh, once, I was over there, but those are different times. And now I'm here. And the whole going to Sparta begins by saying, like, they're preparing for some sort of wedding, I think, that Menelaus's son, not Helen's son, but Menelaus's son, with an enslaved woman, I think, is getting ready to wed, whereas and Hermione is about to wed Achilles' son. So Hermione, Helen's daughter, their daughter, uh, and so this is like a joyful time, for them, and it's showing you there's celebrations going on, there's love and family values there. So she is in her element. This is how Helen should have been before Helen was kidnapped or forced or decided, whatever, to go to Paris. This is where she belongs. And in this place where she belongs, she had that second honeymoon with Menelaus right on the way back from Troy, where they went to like Egypt, and she learned medicines in Egypt, and which is why she had medicines to offer them to soothe their ails or what have you. So she relaxed them with medicines, and then she was able to prophesy. In her prophecy, I loved the poetry, actually, in the words of her prophecy, and I feel like that homecoming that she's prophesying um, mirrored her homecoming too. I can't help but think that when she's saying, and these birds, these omens are prophesying when Odysseus returns, and I'm thinking, I wonder what omens she read. Was she given omens about her return someday ever? Did she hope for her return? Because she asked in the Iliad, she asked Aphrodite, or she told Aphrodite, I want to go home to my husband, like clearly saying that I want to go home. Helen had been wanting to go home since the Iliad. In that 10th year of war, she wanted to go home. And it's very powerful that she is able to assure Telemachus, your father will go home. And he might even be home now, avenging himself. And even if, okay, so let's just say that was stuck with Paris, and she was hoping that the battle between Menelaus and Paris would it would mean in the Iliad that would mean that Menelaus would win and she can go home, right? But Aphrodite forces her instead to be with Paris because that's your husband right now. I mean, ick, absolute ick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's appalling. It's
It,
appalling that anyone doesn't see it for what it is as like a kidnapping and an actual victim blaming. The original victim blaming is trying to blame any of these things on Helen, really.
and she was, even if you think she followed Paris willingly, but it could have, clearly when she had the interaction with Aphrodite in the Iliad, she said something like, "If you like Paris so much, you marry him." She says that, and so to recall the fact that Aphrodite somehow made her go to Paris. So whether if she was kidnapped or somehow there's some sort of spell that was cast on her so that she was in love with Paris at the time and followed him, clearly by the 10th year of this war, she just wants to go home and she doesn't want this man and she wants to go home. So how awful that she's being forced by her goddess half sister to stay and be with this man and comfort him the night before he's about to have a battle with her real husband. Like, let's think about that. Like, oh my God, how awful. So that, that's why going to this prophecy, I'm thinking she's giving comfort to Telemachus and she wishes somebody had comforted her to say, no, don't worry, don't worry. Someone's going to avenge you. Your husband's going to comfort you. You will go home. So that's why I picked that particular passage for Helen. It was supposed to be a powerful moment that reflects all that.
It's such a powerful moment. And then immediately after, they load him up with these gifts that are basically exactly like the ones that we'll find on a Bronze Age or an Iron Age shipwreck. So it's such a powerful part, the interaction between Helen and Odysseus's son. And now I'm off to go see the
Oh,
Chris Nolan version of it. I'm so
okay.
excited. So I will have to report back next time on my thoughts. But no matter what, I think no matter how accurate we think the depiction is, or the script writing based on the translations that we know and love, or kind of in the original Greek and the transmitted copies that I'm sure you're much more familiar with than I am, having only read the translations in English. No matter what, I'm just really grateful that people are so excited about the world of the Odyssey, are so excited about ancient Greek myths and storytelling. And I'm really glad that this is a way that our research has kind of brought us further together in that, what you do with the ancient music, that ancient music was just, or music in the ancient period was just so pervasive. It was such a part of everyday life, of ritual and entertainment and just being in the home. And then my work with the seafaring and the sort of maritime travel, was also just pervasive. It was the only way to get to Ithaca. It was the only way to get home. It was the only way to get to any of these islands. And I just love how the Odyssey has kind of really brought together our totally, completely separate strains of research into a really fun and fascinating experience. I'm so glad we got to chat about the Odyssey today.
Thank you so much, Briggs, because my goodness, I mean, you really brought up so many different points and perspectives as somebody who's traveled to these places and gone in the water and gone on the ships and just traveled. So thank you. So exciting. And I hope to, be in touch and connect and figure out collaboration sometime with you. And, just thank you so much for today. That was a great
Absolutely. Thank you for having
conversation.
me. And I'll make you a promise right now that now what I'm going to manifest finding on an ancient shipwreck, I'm going to find you an ancient lyre someday, and then we can study it together and do scientific analysis on it together. So now that's my next big find that I'll keep looking for is an ancient lyre.
Thank you so much, Briggs. Well, I'll
Thank
have to say
you.
goodbye for now and let you go on your way. Um, so have a wonderful rest of your day and talk to you soon.
Yeah, adios.